The air at Camp Pendleton smelled of salt and smoke that night. The Pacific winds carried a damp chill across the training grounds, rustling through the eucalyptus trees that bordered the barracks. Elena Rivera stood at the edge of the quad, arms folded, eyes fixed on the cluster of Marines who circled a steel trash barrel. Flames licked the night sky, orange and hungry, spitting sparks into the darkness. Her breath caught when she realized what was burning. It wasn't just any pile of cloth inside that barrel. It was her Navy service uniform. The laughter stung worse than the fire. "Guess she'll get the message now," one Marine chuckled, tossing in another sleeve of fabric. The gold buttons popped with a hiss as heat devoured them. "She doesn't belong here," another voice said, sharp and mocking. "Hell, she doesn't belong anywhere near us." Elena's fists clenched so tightly, her nails dug crescents into her palms. The uniform wasn't just stitched fabric. It was proof of every mile she had run, every blister, every exam, every ounce of effort she had poured into serving. And now it curled in the flames, as if her entire worth could be reduced to smoke. Her instincts screamed at her to shout, to lunge forward, to drag it out of the fire before the last shred turned black. But she stayed frozen. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence cuts sharper than words. Still, her silence didn't protect her from the humiliation that rolled in waves from their laughter. Her father's voice rose unbidden in her memory. "They'll try to break you. Don't let them." He had spoken those words the night before she shipped out for basic training. A Marine veteran with 20 years of service, he had known what awaited her, a world where women were still tested twice, judged twice, and dismissed twice as fast. The uniform collapsed inward, flames swallowing its final threads. The Marines dispersed, satisfied with their message, their boots scuffing on the asphalt as they vanished into the barracks. Elena remained, staring into the barrel until the embers glowed like dying stars. She didn't cry. Tears would have given them victory. Instead, she inhaled the acrid smoke and let it sear her lungs. She wanted to remember that sting forever. That night, Elena didn't return to her bunk. She sat cross-legged on the cold concrete outside, the glow from the barrel casting shadows across her determined face. The barracks windows went dark one by one as others surrendered to sleep. But Elena's mind remained restless, spinning, reaching for something beyond pain. She replayed every insult she'd heard since arriving. "You're too small. This isn't a place for women. Try the nursing. Corps leave the fighting to us." Each word stacked like weight on her shoulders. Yet beneath the heaviness, a strange clarity formed. If they thought the uniform defined her, then they hadn't seen what she was capable of. Her eyes dropped to the phone in her hand. For hours she scrolled through naval pathways, opportunities, specialized training programs. And then her gaze froze on one line that made her pulse quicken. Naval Special Warfare, SEAL Candidate Program. Everyone knew the reputation. The program broke the strongest men in the military. Hell Week alone crushed spirits, shredded bodies, and left only a fraction standing. No woman had ever worn the trident. Elena stared at the application link, her thumb hovering. The idea was insane. She wasn't built like the others. She was shorter, lighter, and already a target for ridicule. If she failed, she'd hand her tormentors fresh ammunition. But another memory surfaced: her father's medals, kept in a wooden box under his bed. He had never flaunted them, never boasted, but when she was 12, he let her hold one. "This isn't for being the strongest," he told her softly. "It's for refusing to quit." The fire in her chest reignited. She tapped the screen. The application process began, lines of digital forms demanding her history, qualifications, physical records. She typed steadily, filling each box with unwavering fingers. Midnight stretched toward dawn, but she didn't stop. By sunrise, when the first bugle call echoed across Camp Pendleton, Elena hit submit. The ashes of her service uniform still lingered in the barrel, but a new flame burned hotter inside her. The following week, whispers spread like wildfire. Rivera applied for SEALs? No way. She won't last a day. Publicity stunt, maybe. The ridicule was sharper now, laced with disbelief. Yet beneath the mockery, Elena caught flickers of unease. She saw it in the sideways glances, in the way conversations hushed when she entered a room. She had crossed an invisible line. They wanted her gone. But now she was threatening to prove she could stay. She ignored them. Every insult became fuel. At night, while others relaxed, she pushed through extra runs, extra pull-ups, endless swims in the icy Pacific. Her body screamed, but she pushed harder. Sometimes, when exhaustion threatened to fold her, she would close her eyes and picture the flames curling around her uniform. She would smell the smoke, feel the sting in her throat. That memory became her secret weapon, reminding her she wasn't training for acceptance. She was training for payback, for pride, for history. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Thick, official, stamped with a Navy crest. Elena unfolded it with steady hands, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Congratulations. You have been selected to attend Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Bud S training in Coronado, California. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Not victory, not yet, but a doorway opening where none had existed before. She folded the letter carefully, sliding it into the pocket of her fatigues. For the first time since the fire, she felt whole again. Not because of what had been given, but because of what she was about to seize. The ashes of her burned uniform were gone, scattered by the wind. In their place, a different fire now fueled her steps, one that would carry her into the crucible where only the strongest survived. Elena Rivera wasn't just going to answer her tormentors. She was going to rewrite the rules entirely. Elena Rivera's first sight of Coronado Naval Base was a blur of gray skies and steel buildings, washed in the cold Pacific breeze. The ocean's waves crashed relentlessly against the shore, as if testing every soul who dared approach. She felt the sting of salt spray on her face and the weight of the duffel bag on her shoulder, small burden compared to the one in her mind. She wasn't just a recruit. She was a woman about to step into the most grueling military program in the world. Every step she took toward the training compound felt like a declaration. I belong here. The first thing she noticed was the men, tall, broad, built for the impossible. Many wore the same uniformed frown, eyes calculating, sizing her up with sharp judgment. She could feel their disbelief radiate like heat. Whispers followed her across the compound. She's tiny. Think she'll last a week? Maybe two. Elena ignored them. She knew the numbers. Statistically, nearly 80% of candidates failed Bud S. Most of those who quit were stronger, bigger, faster than she was. That only made the stakes clear. She needed more than grit. She needed cunning, endurance, and unbreakable focus. The next morning, the candidates were assembled on the beach. The sand was cold and wet beneath their boots, waves crashing as instructors circled like predators. The lead instructor, a burly veteran with piercing eyes, barked, "If anyone thinks they're here to prove anything to themselves, leave now. This is about breaking you." Elena clenched her jaw. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving to herself that the fire from her uniform hadn't consumed her, it had forged her. The first exercise was deceptively simple, timed runs along the shoreline. But simplicity was a trap. Every step, every sprint into the sand, sapped strength, tested lungs, and demanded focus. The men around her groaned, cursed, and collapsed. Elena pushed forward, calves burning, heart pounding, lungs burning like fire. Her first swim came next. The water was frigid, slicing into her skin like 1,000 knives. Instructors yelled from the shore, demanding perfect strokes, perfect timing, perfect execution. Most men floundered. Some panicked. Elena's fingers cut through the waves with precision. Her body ached, but she didn't falter. Every stroke was a silent promise to herself and to the ashes that once held her uniform. The first night brought new challenges. Sleep was non-existent. Candidates huddled in small tents or along the beach, the wind shaking the thin nylon walls. Elena lay on the sand, cold seeping into her bones, muscles screaming in protest. But she couldn't rest, not really. Her mind replayed the whispers of the camp back home, the fire, the laughter, the mockery. They think I won't make it. Her resolve hardened. This wasn't a fight against the ocean, the sand, or exhaustion. This was against everyone who doubted her. She wasn't just training. She was rewriting the narrative that had begun with flames and ridicule. The next day brought obstacle courses and team drills. Men twice her size stumbled, argued, or gave up entirely. Instructors screamed, correcting posture, grip, and breathing. Elena moved deliberately, carefully calculating every movement, every pull, every push. Strength wasn't everything, technique was just as critical. She scaled walls, crawled under barbed wire, and hauled weighted logs across the sand with precision. Some men started to notice. Not all, but a few paused mid-drill to glance at her, recognition flickering in their eyes. She was surviving where they expected her to fail. Survival was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and the program intensified. Hell Week loomed, a legendary trial by fire, where sleep, warmth, and comfort vanished entirely. Elena knew whispers would follow her, that mockery would turn to skepticism, then perhaps to admiration. That progression didn't matter. What mattered was mastery over her own body and mind. Her first night in the barracks was another trial. Instructors demanded meticulous organization, physical conditioning, and unshakable attention to detail. A single mistake could result in extra drills or humiliation. Elena's bunkmates muttered about her, some under their breath, others loud enough to challenge her confidence. What's she doing here? She can't possibly survive this. Elena responded with silence and focus. Every movement was deliberate, every task executed with precision. Within days, she began to earn respect, not from loud compliments, but from the quiet acknowledgement in the eyes of those who noticed her resilience. Swimming drills became tests of endurance and mental toughness. Candidates were pushed to their limits, swimming under planks, carrying weighted logs in choppy waves, treading water for what felt like hours. Elena's body trembled, lips blue, muscles burning, yet she refused to quit. One instructor yelled, "You're going to drown if you stop moving." Elena barely registered the words. Drowning was not an option. Her mind repeated a single mantra: fire doesn't consume me. It makes me stronger. She saw men panic, giving up after minutes, yet she pressed on, counting strokes, focusing on rhythm, controlling panic. When she emerged from the water, shaking and exhausted, she noticed the same men who had mocked her now staring. Not with derision, but with something else. Surprise, maybe even respect. Physical endurance alone was not enough. Bud S. demanded mental resilience, tactical thinking, and teamwork. Elena quickly learned the subtle politics of survival, forming temporary alliances, observing weaknesses, understanding strengths. She didn't speak much, letting her actions do the talking. When the team had to carry an injured man through an obstacle course, Elena didn't hesitate. She lifted and carried, giving instructions clearly, ensuring the injured didn't falter. By the end, several men had to acknowledge silently that her presence made the difference between failure and success. At night, when exhaustion made limbs feel like lead, Elena wrote in a small notebook she had tucked into her duffel. Notes on drills, observations about teammates, reflections on what drove her forward. On the last page, she wrote simply, "Ashes are nothing if you have fire inside." By the end of the first month, murmurs spread across the candidates and instructors alike. Elena Rivera was no longer just the small woman in the back. She had become a force quietly impossible to ignore. Some men still whispered, but the tone had shifted. The mocking undercurrent was replaced by reluctant respect, curiosity, and the subtle fear of someone who refuses to break. And through it all, the fire from that barrel at Camp Pendleton never left her mind. It burned as memory, as fuel, as proof. Every early morning run, every freezing swim, every scream of an instructor became a continuation of that first lesson. She could endure more than anyone expected. When she lay on the beach at night, listening to waves crash against the rocks, Elena didn't feel small or alone. She felt ready. Ready to face Hell Week, ready to face doubt, ready to prove that no flame, literal or figurative, could consume her spirit. Elena Rivera had arrived at Coronado not just as a recruit, but as a challenger to every expectation, every prejudice, every whisper that told her she didn't belong. And deep down, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The fire that burned her uniform had not destroyed her. It had made her unstoppable. The first chill of Hell Week struck before dawn. Fog clung to the sand like a living thing, swallowing the horizon and the edge of the ocean alike. Candidates lined up, bare-chested in the freezing air, salt stinging their skin, muscles taut with exhaustion. The instructors paced along the shoreline, their boots crunching over sand, eyes cold and unyielding. Every candidate understood the unspoken rule. One misstep, one falter, and hell would consume you. Elena Rivera stood at the front, shoulders back, teeth clenched. She had prepared for this moment, but nothing could truly convey the brutality ahead. "Hands behind your head. Move," barked the lead instructor, a veteran whose voice carried like a cannon over the pounding surf. The first drill was a 20-mile surf run, log carries, and obstacle navigation, all chained together with no rest. Waves smashed over the candidates' heads as they dragged their bodies through icy water, sand cutting into bruised shoulders. Many men screamed with every crash of the surf. Elena kept pace, muscles burning, lungs screaming, counting strokes and breaths to maintain rhythm. The men around her began faltering. Some sank beneath the waves. Some shouted in frustration, cursing themselves and the training. Elena didn't falter. When the first log carry began, 3 men collapsed under its weight. Elena adjusted her grip, hoisted her portion, and helped steady a teammate who had begun to slide into exhaustion. Her body was trembling, every muscle screaming in protest, but her mind remained sharp, calculating, focused. Every movement was precise. Pain was a companion, not a prison. Hours stretched into a blur. Candidates waded through freezing rivers, dragged rafts across the beach, crawled under barbed wire, and were forced to run barefoot on gravel. Sleep was a distant memory. Meals were minimal, barely enough to sustain the shattered bodies. The instructors offered no mercy, shouting incessantly, correcting posture, punishing hesitation. One misstep meant extra drills, sometimes hundreds of push-ups in freezing surf, sometimes crawling through mud until the skin peeled. Late into the night, Elena's body threatened mutiny. Her shoulders burned, her legs quivered, her lungs ached. Yet she pressed on, reminding herself of the fire at Camp Pendleton. The uniform that had been burned was a ghost she carried in her memory. Its flames weren't her defeat. They were her fuel. Every grueling step, every shivering breath, every scream of frustration became part of a ritual, an alchemy of pain into power. By the 4th night, exhaustion was absolute. Candidates staggered in a line along the sand, faces pale, lips blue, eyes glassy. Instructors circled, their eyes sharp, measuring resolve. Many men whispered under their breath that Elena couldn't last another hour. She smiled to herself. They still didn't understand. The fifth night brought the water confidence test, swimming under obstacles, holding breath for minutes while currents tried to drag them under, and performing synchronized drills without error. One candidate, panicked, nearly drowned. Elena dove beneath the turbulent waves without hesitation, pulling him along while keeping her own strokes precise. Instructor shouted, "You can't save him. Keep moving." But Elena refused to abandon him. The lesson wasn't just about survival. It was about refusing to leave anyone behind. When they finally emerged, exhausted, shivering, and gasping, several men stared at her. Something in their expressions had shifted. No longer just disbelief, they were witnessing endurance, courage, and leadership. And this was only the beginning. During brief moments of sleep, if they could call it that, Elena reflected on every insult, every sneer, every laugh from those who had burned her uniform. It wasn't vengeance she sought. It was transformation. She wasn't here to prove them wrong. She was here to prove to herself that no one could define her limits. Every night, she scribbled notes in her waterproof notebook, recording drills, strategies, observations, and reminders of her internal mantra. Fire doesn't consume me. It makes me stronger. These notes became sacred, small anchors in the storm of physical torture. By the end of the week, Hell Week had shredded nearly half the candidates. Fingers blistered, backs torn, lungs raw from endless surf swims, feet bleeding from hours of running. Some men gave up entirely, throwing themselves into the waves as if surrender could erase exhaustion. But Elena remained, small, fierce, unwavering. She carried her own weight and others, every action deliberate, every choice precise. A team drill tested leadership. Candidates had to navigate a mock village carrying a stretcher with a simulated casualty. Many faltered, arguing, panicking, or leaving gaps. Elena's team stumbled initially, but she took control without hesitation. Her voice carried over shouts, precise, calm, commanding. Shift left. Keep low, eyes up. Her teammates followed, stunned by the clarity and authority in her voice. They completed the drill perfectly, an achievement that earned silent acknowledgement from instructors. A whispered comment from one of the instructors reached the wind. She's small, but damn. She commands presence. Elena didn't smile. She didn't need approval. The lesson wasn't for them. It was for herself. The final day of Hell Week arrived. Exhaustion had reached a point where it wasn't just physical, it was mental, existential. Candidates stumbled in rhythmless lines along the beach. Some sat in the surf, tears freezing on their cheeks. Others cursed the instructors, the ocean, the very air. Yet Elena's eyes were steady. She had known this moment was coming. Every night without sleep, every grueling drill, every injury, every insult, every one of them had led to this. The last exercise was a final surf and obstacle drill, chained to another and another, until every muscle burned beyond recognition. Elena's body screamed in protest, but her mind was unbreakable. Every inhale was precision, every exhale focus. Waves slammed her into the sand repeatedly, bruising, battering, yet she rose, again and again. When the drill concluded, she collapsed onto the wet sand, trembling but unbroken. Instructors circled, measuring fatigue, mental endurance, and spirit. Many men had broken. Some lay sobbing, broken by the relentless pace. Elena's uniform was soaked, hair matted, skin raw, but she was upright, breathing evenly, eyes clear and sharp. One of the instructors, a hardened SEAL veteran with a scar tracing his cheek, approached her. "Rivera," he said quietly, almost to himself, "you've got more fire than most men here." Elena met his gaze evenly, refusing to let pride or relief show too strongly. She had no victory yet. She had survived Hell Week, yes, but this was only the first trial of a career that would demand far more. In the days that followed, Elena began to notice subtle changes. Candidates who had whispered insults now avoided her gaze, some staring in grudging respect. Instructors nodded more frequently, offering terse approval for precision, endurance, and tactical thinking. The women who came after her in training would someday hear her story whispered across the barracks, of a small woman who endured Hell Week with unshakable resolve. Yet, despite external recognition, Elena carried no illusions. Survival was not triumph. Survival was preparation. The trident, the ultimate symbol of the SEAL, was still far ahead, wading through months of training, trials, and missions that would push her limits further than any fire, sweat, or salt water could. And through it all, the memory of her burned uniform remained vivid, a reminder that humiliation could be transformed into power, and fire, whether from a barrel or life itself, could forge an unbreakable will. Elena Rivera had entered Hell Week a recruit. She emerged a contender, not because she wanted revenge, not because she sought approval, but because the fire inside her refused to die. The final days of Bud S training dawned cold and unforgiving. The Pacific waves crashed relentlessly against Coronado's shoreline, spraying salt water across the beach and soaking the remaining candidates to their bones. Every muscle in Elena Rivera's body burned with exhaustion. Every joint ached from months of relentless drills, yet she rose each morning without hesitation. Sleep was scarce, yet her eyes were steady and focused, scanning the horizon with quiet determination. Her uniform, soaked and tattered from countless drills, carried the weight of months of endurance. Each stain, each tear, each fray was a badge of her struggle, proof she had survived what had broken most men. Instructors gathered the remaining candidates for one final series of exercises, an ultimate test of stamina, skill, and composure. The lineup was silent, tensely waiting. Elena could hear only the pounding of the surf, the harsh breaths of the others, and the rhythmic thrum of her own heartbeat. The first exercise was a final obstacle course, designed to test strength, speed, and strategy simultaneously. Candidates were expected to scale walls, crawl through mud, navigate suspended ropes, and carry weighted logs across the beach, all in a single, continuous motion. Mistakes were punished with extra reps, relentless instructors barking orders over the roar of waves. Elena's body screamed in protest. Her shoulders burned from lifting logs, her calves ached from the uneven sand, and her lungs were raw from cold surf swims. Yet every movement was precise. Every handhold, every step, every breath calculated. She wasn't merely surviving, she was commanding her own endurance. Around her, men stumbled, faltered, even collapsed. She offered silent assistance when needed, steadying a teammate who had tripped or shivering alongside those struggling in the surf. Every action reinforced what she had learned in Hell Week. Leadership wasn't about size or strength. It was about resolve, composure, and courage under fire. Hours later, the final water drill began. Candidates were submerged in frigid surf, tasked with retrieving equipment from the ocean floor, navigating obstacles while holding breath, and completing precision tasks under extreme pressure. Waves crashed over them, threatening to drag the weakest into despair. Elena's fingers dug into sand and rocks beneath the water, her eyes locked on the objective. Every movement was deliberate, every stroke measured. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Around her, men gasped, sputtered, some outright panicking. Elena remained calm, pulling herself and a struggling teammate to safety, earning a terse nod from an instructor, one of the highest acknowledgments in SEAL training. When the drill concluded, candidates collapsed on the shore, shivering, exhausted, and broken. Elena lay next to them, gasping for air, muscles trembling violently, but her eyes were bright. She had endured. She had proven that no fire, no insult, no doubt could consume her spirit. The following day was ceremonial. Only a fraction of the original candidates remained. Attrition had been brutal. Instructors marched the survivors across the sand to a raised platform, where the tridents, the ultimate symbol of a Navy SEAL, waited to be pinned. Elena stood in line, shivering in the early morning chill. She glanced at her fellow survivors, men who had mocked her in whispers, men who had doubted her resolve. Some avoided her gaze, the weight of unspoken acknowledgement hanging heavy in the air. When her name was called, she walked forward, every step deliberate, carrying herself with the quiet confidence forged through months of struggle. The lead instructor pinned the trident to her chest. Its weight was heavier than the medals of her father, heavier than any log she had carried, heavier than the years of doubt she had endured. Yet it didn't crush her, it grounded her. Flashes from cameras lit the morning. For the first time in her career, Alana's achievement was recognized in full view of the world. First woman to earn the trident. The headline would echo for years. Yet Elena felt no triumph, no self-congratulation. Her victory was quiet, internal, forged in months of fire and relentless effort. After the ceremony, she lingered on the shore, watching the Pacific waves crash endlessly. Her uniform was tattered, hair matted with sand and sweat, and her body ached from head to toe. Yet there was a serenity in her eyes, a calm forged from the storm she had endured. One by one, instructors approached, offering terse acknowledgement. "Rivera," said the scarred SEAL who had first remarked on her presence during Hell Week, "you didn't just survive. You led, you endured, and you inspired. That's all we ask of a SEAL." Elena simply nodded. Praise was unnecessary. She had survived for herself, not for accolades. The memory of her burned uniform was still vivid, the smoke, the laughter, the humiliation, but now it existed alongside something stronger. The trident, gleaming against her chest, a testament to her endurance and unshakable resolve. In the days following graduation, Elena began interacting with fellow SEALs and instructors outside of training. Whispers of respect followed her quietly. Men who had once sneered now nodded in acknowledgement. Some quietly approached her, offering congratulations or sharing strategies and lessons from their own experiences. The dynamic had shifted. She was no longer the small woman everyone doubted. She was Rivera SEAL, a survivor, a leader. The same men who had burned her uniform and mocked her abilities at Camp Pendleton were now shadows in her past. She didn't seek revenge. Her achievement spoke louder than any words ever could. Still, Elena's mind never wandered far from the fire. That moment of humiliation had defined her early days in the military, and it had shaped every decision, every action since. The trident wasn't just a pin. It was proof that she had transformed fire into power. The memory of flames no longer hurt. It inspired. She began preparing mentally for the next phase of her journey, returning to units, joining operational missions, and inevitably confronting those who had once doubted her. But the focus wasn't vengeance. It was demonstration. She would prove, through action and leadership, that strength, resolve, and courage cannot be measured by size or gender, and no fire could ever diminish spirit. When she finally left the beach, uniform pristine after ceremonial cleaning, hair tied neatly, and her trident shining, Elena paused. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, private smile. She had endured the impossible, risen from ashes, and emerged not only victorious, but transformed. Every whisper of doubt from her past had been answered not with words, but with grit, action, and relentless resolve. She had taken the first step toward the next chapter of her life, a chapter where respect would be earned, barriers broken, and history rewritten. Elena Rivera was no longer the girl whose uniform had burned. She was a SEAL, unbroken, unstoppable, and just beginning to show the world what fire could truly create. Months had passed since graduation, and Elena Rivera had been assigned to SEAL Team 2 for operational training exercises. Her first day back on a base she had once only dreamed of joining felt surreal. The ocean's roar was familiar, yet everything had changed. This time, she was not the small, doubted recruit. She was a SEAL, trident gleaming on her chest, body honed through months of brutal training, mind sharpened by survival. The base was alive with activity jets taxiing, helicopters rotating on the pad, Marines and SEALs moving with military precision. Elena's steps were deliberate, each footfall measured and purposeful. Eyes followed her, some curious, some skeptical, some quietly apprehensive. Whispers carried across the hangars. Rivera? She's back. She ignored them, focusing instead on the task ahead. Her first operational exercise would pair Navy SEALs with Marines for joint maneuvers in a mock village. The objective was straightforward, but brutally demanding. Neutralize threats, extract hostages, and coordinate with unfamiliar units under strict time constraints. As the briefing began, Elena scanned the room. Faces stared back, some familiar, others strangers. And then, in the corner, she saw them, the men who had burned her uniform, the same faces twisted into expressions that tried to mask disbelief. Their eyes widened subtly as they noticed her trident, the way her posture commanded attention, even without words. Whispers trailed behind them, faint but unmistakable. The SEAL captain cleared his throat. Teams, form up. We need precision, coordination, and focus. Any questions? No one spoke. The captain's gaze swept the room, briefly landing on Elena. Her chin was high, eyes steady. The message was silent. I am here. I belong. The exercise began with a simulated helicopter insertion. Candidates sprinted across the landing zone, weapons ready, into the mock village. Elena's team moved like a single organism, precise, coordinated, unstoppable. Doors were breached, threats neutralized, and hostages secured with efficiency. Her voice carried instructions with calm authority. Cover left. Stack on the door. Clear in 3. The Marines, accustomed to operating without female SEALs, hesitated at first, unsure of her commands. A slight misstep, a glance sideways, but Elena's focus never wavered. She didn't shout or demand respect. She earned it through action. Step by step, room by room, her team followed. When the exercise ended, instructors nodded silently. Some of the Marines who had once doubted her couldn't hide their astonishment. One muttered to a teammate, "That's Rivera?" His voice carried awe and disbelief, the remnants of old prejudice beginning to crumble. After the exercise, Elena lingered near the briefing room, while other teams filed out. The men who had burned her uniform approached slowly, hesitantly, eyes avoiding direct contact. One, whose face had been twisted in mockery during her training days, finally spoke, voice low. "We didn't expect that." Elena met his gaze evenly, calm and composed. "Expectations are yours to carry. Execution is mine to prove." No smirk. No insult. Just truth. Their awkwardness said more than words could. She had not returned for revenge. She had returned for undeniable presence. Respect, begrudging or earned, now belonged to her. Operational exercises continued over the next week. Elena's unit was assigned a series of night maneuvers, urban simulations, and endurance trials. Her leadership and tactical precision became evident to all as she guided teams through simulated ambushes, obstacle-laden corridors, and coordination with supporting units. The men who had whispered and mocked her now watched in quiet deference. Some studied her every move, trying to understand how a woman so slight in stature could lead with authority, precision, and resilience that surpassed many seasoned males. Elena didn't seek validation, but she noticed. Every respectful glance, every silent acknowledgement, reinforced a simple truth. She had transformed not only herself, but the perception of those who had doubted her. One late evening, after a grueling exercise, the team gathered near the ocean for debrief. Candidates were exhausted, mud-streaked, and soaked from night operations. The moonlight reflected off Elena's trident, catching in the salt spray like a quiet signal to the world. A Marine approached, hesitant, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think you'd make it this far. You? You lead us better than anyone I've seen. Elena simply nodded. Strength isn't measured by size or numbers. It's measured by resolve, by the refusal to give up. Nothing else matters. Her words hum in the night air, more potent than any confrontation or retort could have been. During the following days, joint operations demanded higher coordination. Elena's unit cleared multiple buildings, extracted mock hostages, and executed complex maneuvers under simulated fire. Each success solidified her reputation, not through words, but through undeniable proof of skill, endurance, and leadership. By the final exercise of the week, every Marine and SEAL knew her name. The ones who had doubted her now followed her commands without question. Every glance she cast, every instruction she gave, carried weight. She had become a force whose presence alone inspired performance and focus. And yet, through every success, Elena never forgot the fire that had started it all, the blaze that had consumed her uniform months before. That memory, once a mark of humiliation, had been transformed into purpose. Every drill, every exercise, every calculated movement was a quiet tribute to the resilience she had forged from ashes. On the last day, after a particularly intense urban simulation, Elena walked through the mock village alone, surveying the results of the exercise. She paused in front of a building that had once been used for a training scenario where she had struggled in early drills. Memories surfaced, the exhaustion, the fear, the whispers of those who doubted her. Now, standing in full combat gear, trident on her chest, Elena felt a sense of quiet triumph. The building, the streets, even the ocean waves seemed to acknowledge her presence. She had transformed the fire of doubt into something stronger than any weapon, confidence and mastery. Her former tormentors lingered nearby, silently observing, unsure whether to confront, apologize, or remain distant. Elena didn't offer guidance. She didn't need to. Her performance, her presence, and her unwavering composure had spoken volumes louder than any confrontation ever could. By the end of the week, instructors gathered the teams for a final debrief. Elena's leadership, execution, and composure were highlighted as exemplary. Whispered conversations circulated among Marines. She didn't just survive. She dominated. I've never seen anyone move like that before. Elena smiled faintly, but not for recognition. This was only the beginning. Respect was earned, and she had earned it not through vengeance, but through relentless skill, endurance, and unshakable will. The fire from Camp Pendleton had long since died in physical form, yet its memory lived on in her drive. She had returned not as a victim of ridicule, but as proof of what determination, courage, and relentless focus could accomplish. Elena Rivera had become more than a survivor. She had become a force no one could ignore, a SEAL in every sense of the word. And for the first time since the ashes, she allowed herself to imagine the next steps, missions, challenges, and encounters that would push her further than ever before. The past had tried to define her. She had refused. Now, the future lay wide open, and she was ready. The morning air at the joint training site was thick with mist, cold enough to bite through fabric, yet alive with tension. Elena Rivera adjusted her helmet, tightened her gloves, and scanned the terrain. The mock urban village stretched out before her, multiple buildings, narrow alleyways, and scattered debris, creating a labyrinth of obstacles. Today's exercise was no ordinary drill. It was a full-scale simulated assault, combining SEAL and Marine units in live-fire coordination exercises, with timed objectives, hostages, and ambush simulations. Elena's heart thumped steadily. This was the moment she had trained for. This was the proof that months of grueling effort, sleepless nights, and relentless focus had been worth it. Her team gathered at the staging point. Whispers floated from nearby units, carried by the wind. Among them, she noticed the familiar faces of the men who had once mocked her at Camp Pendleton. Their eyes widened as they took in her full combat gear. Body armor fitted precisely, the trident gleaming on her chest, rifle in hand, movements confident and controlled. They tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore. Elena didn't seek confrontation, yet she could feel their unease. This wasn't about revenge, it was about undeniable capability. "Team, we move at 0600, she said, her voice steady, calm, and commanding. "Primary objective: secure the building, neutralize threats, extract hostages. Secondary: coordinate with Marine units on perimeter. Let's move." Her team nodded, executing movements with fluid precision. No hesitation. No faltering. The first obstacle was the perimeter breach. Marines and SEALs had to move in coordinated formations while under simulated suppressive fire. Elena's team approached a corner building. Gunfire echoed, flashbangs detonated, and smoke filled the air. Most men flinched at the sensory overload. Elena advanced, scanning windows, corners, and entryways. "Stack on me. Clear left first. Eyes sharp." Her instructions were crisp, yet calm under chaos. Her teammates obeyed instinctively. Every decision was deliberate, every angle covered, every possible threat anticipated. A Marine tried to lead without coordination. Elena intercepted quickly, gently but firmly. "Hold position. Watch the left flank. Follow my count." Her voice carried authority, not arrogance. The Marine hesitated, then obeyed. It worked flawlessly. The team cleared the building without incident. Her former tormentors were nearby, watching from across the courtyard. One muttered under his breath, "She's unreal." The exercise escalated. Explosions, simulated gunfire, and coordinated chaos created an environment that tested every nerve, every reflex. Elena's team moved as one, anticipating each other's steps, covering angles, clearing rooms, and securing hostages with precision. When a simulated casualty tripped over debris and fell, Elena reacted instantly. She secured the area, hoisted the trainee onto her shoulder, and continued the operation. Every action reinforced leadership, not just through command, but through example. An instructor observed from a distance, notebook in hand. "Remarkable," he muttered. "Calm, precise, and fearless under conditions that destroy even experienced operators." By midday, the exercise moved to close-quarters combat simulations. Narrow corridors, tight corners, and split-second decision-making made every movement critical. Elena's voice guided her team. "Right door first. Stack low. Watch 6. Her former tormentors were now closer, forced to witness her tactical brilliance firsthand. One tried to intervene, suggesting a different approach. Elena paused, looked at him evenly, and said, "Your method risks the team. Follow my lead." Now, they followed, reluctantly, and as the exercise concluded, they had no choice but to acknowledge her skill. Every building cleared, hostages secured, casualties minimized. The mock battlefield itself seemed to recognize her dominance. Evenings were spent in debriefs. Instructors praised her precision, her calm under pressure, and her instinctive command of operations. Other SEALs sought advice, asking how she maintained clarity under extreme conditions. Elena never boasted. Her answer was simple: focus on your objective. Ignore distractions. Lead by example. Never let doubt dictate action. The men who had mocked her at Camp Pendleton lingered, attempting to approach her. Their words were halting, uncertain. We didn't expect that. She met their gaze evenly. Expectations are irrelevant. Execution defines results. No smirk, no gloating, only truth. They turned away, silent, confronted by their own disbelief and her undeniable skill. The final exercise of the week was a coordinated night operation. Darkness, smoke, and simulated chaos created an environment where mistakes were amplified. Elena's team moved silently, efficiently, covering one another, clearing buildings, neutralizing threats, and communicating flawlessly. At one point, a flashbang landed dangerously close to a teammate. Without hesitation, Elena grabbed him, pulling him into cover, maintaining orientation and continuing the operation. The instructors watching took notes furiously, murmuring about her instinct, calm under stress, and tactical genius. When the exercise ended, every team was exhausted, soaked, and shaking. But Elena's unit had completed objectives faster, cleaner, and more efficiently than any other. The men who had doubted her could not hide their astonishment. One whispered, "We thought she'd break under the first wave." She dominated. Elena didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her performance had spoken volumes. That night, while the base slept, Elena stood on the edge of the mock village, gazing at the ocean waves reflecting moonlight. Memories of Camp Pendleton, the barrel, the flames, the laughter surfaced vividly. She had returned not just to prove skill, but to embody transformation. Her former tormentors had seen her, and they understood, silently, what she represented: resilience, mastery, and the quiet triumph of determination over doubt. Elena allowed herself a small, private smile. The fire that once sought to destroy her had become the furnace in which she had been forged. Every drill, every test, every painstaking hour of preparation had been an extension of that fire. By the end of the week, instructors approached her privately. "Rivera," said one, "you're a model for the next generation. Not just a SEAL, but a leader. Others will follow you, and for good reason." Elena nodded. Recognition was not her goal, but it was welcome acknowledgement of the journey she had endured. The men who had burned her uniform at Camp Pendleton remained in her peripheral vision, lingering awkwardly. Their laughter had been replaced by quiet respect, their disbelief by acknowledgement. Elena didn't need to speak to them. Her actions, her composure, her mastery of the field had said all that was necessary. She had returned to the field, not for vengeance, not for pride, but to demonstrate that fire could not consume her. It had forged her into something stronger, sharper, and unbreakable. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds, illuminating the sand and concrete of the mock urban environment. Elena Rivera adjusted her gear with practiced precision, the trident gleaming against her chest. Today's exercise was not just another drill, it was the culmination of everything she had endured. Months of Bud S. Hell Week, operational training, and field exercises. This was a test of leadership under pressure, coordination, and tactical execution, and every eye would be on her. Her team assembled quickly, movements tight, disciplined. The men who had once burned her uniform were there too, standing slightly apart, whispers trailing behind them. "Rivera? She's leading?" The exercise began with a complex scenario. A hostile-controlled urban area with multiple entry points, simulated hostages, and surprise ambushes. SEALs and Marines were to operate as one unit, moving in coordinated formations to neutralize threats efficiently. Elena's voice cut through the chaos. Stack on me. Cover angles. Move with precision. The words carried authority, calm, and command. Even seasoned Marines hesitated before following her orders, not out of defiance, but because her confidence demanded attention. Every command was precise, every movement deliberate, every team member accounted for. A flashbang detonated, scattering smoke and disorienting candidates. Panic spread like wildfire. Yet Elena remained steady, scanning the environment, calculating movements, issuing rapid-fire instructions. Stack left. Cover right. Eyes on the exit. Her team moved as one. Rooms were cleared efficiently, threats neutralized, and hostages secured with minimal confusion. Each successful maneuver reinforced her authority, not through intimidation, but through competence. Halfway through the exercise, a simulated casualty fell. The trainee had tripped over debris and was caught in a precarious position under a mock-collapsing structure. Many candidates froze, unsure how to react. Elena didn't hesitate. She moved with fluid precision, securing the trainee, stabilizing him, and continuing the operation. Instructors observing from a distance muttered among themselves, "She leads by example." Calm, precise, fearless. Incredible. The men who had mocked her back at Camp Pendleton watched in stunned silence. Some avoided her gaze. Others studied her, trying to absorb the force of her presence. One muttered, voice barely audible, "We underestimated her." Elena ignored them. Recognition wasn't her goal. Action, execution, and leadership were her focus. By late afternoon, the exercise escalated into night operations. Darkness, smoke, and chaotic sound created a battlefield that tested nerves, reflexes, and strategy simultaneously. Elena led her team through tight alleys, cleared rooms with meticulous precision, and coordinated movements with Marine units who had initially been hesitant to take her seriously. During one tense moment, an instructor called a simulated ambush. Her team instinctively took positions, suppressing the threat and securing the perimeter. Elena's decisions were instantaneous, but every instruction was deliberate. Left flank. Suppress fire. Secure entry. The ambush was neutralized flawlessly. Her team moved seamlessly, each action a reflection of leadership, preparation, and unshakable calm under pressure. At the end of the exercise, all candidates gathered for debriefing. Instructors spoke, noting the clear difference between teams led by Elena and those without her guidance. Precision, calm, and decisive leadership, one remarked. Her team functioned as a single unit under extreme pressure. That's the hallmark of a SEAL leader. The men who had burned her uniform lingered awkwardly, their posture betraying conflicting emotions: respect, disbelief, and a trace of shame. One finally approached, voice low and hesitant. "Rivera, you've changed everything." We didn't think." Elena looked at him evenly, steady, her eyes calm and unwavering. "Expectations are irrelevant. Execution defines results. No smirk. No arrogance. Only truth." The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Following the debrief, Elena took time with her own team. She offered guidance, corrections, and advice to each member, demonstrating not only tactical skill but mentorship. She instructed on strategy, observation, and execution. "You lead by example," one Marine whispered to another, watching Elena patiently correct a younger teammate. "I've never seen anyone command like that before." Elena didn't seek praise, but her presence commanded attention. Each trainee she mentored improved, her guidance a combination of authority, experience, and calm resolve. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a leader forged in fire. Later that evening, The men who had once mocked her uniform approached, unable to resist confrontation or acknowledgement. They tried to speak, hesitation heavy in every word. You really did it," one said finally, eyes fixed on her trident. Elena's reply was simple. "I survived. I led. That's all that matters." The acknowledgement hung in the air, heavy with unspoken realization. Their ridicule, their doubts, and their mockery had been met with action, not words. Elena didn't need to gloat. She had already won through persistence, courage, and undeniable skill. As darkness settled over the base, Elena stood alone on the training grounds, looking at the ocean. The waves, relentless and unyielding, mirrored her own journey, crashing obstacles, relentless pressure, but always moving forward. Memories of Camp Pendleton flashed in her mind. The barrel, the flames, the laughter. Yet now, those flames were no longer a symbol of humiliation. They were the spark that had forged her into something stronger, unbreakable, and respected. Every step of training, every sleepless night, every grueling drill had been an extension of that fire. Elena Rivera had returned not as a victim, but as a force. She had transformed doubt into achievement, humiliation into mastery, and fire into an unshakable will. The men who had burned her uniform had been confronted not with words or anger, but with excellence and leadership. Their disbelief had turned into quiet respect, their whispers into acknowledgement. She had proven that skill, determination, and courage were the true measures of strength. In the weeks that followed, Elena continued to excel in field exercises, mentoring newer candidates and demonstrating tactical brilliance. Her presence commanded attention without demand. Her guidance built confidence in others, and her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The final chapter of her return to units who doubted her wasn't one of confrontation, but demonstration. She had shown that fire, literal or figurative, could not destroy her. It had forged her into something stronger, sharper, and unstoppable. Elena Rivera had transcended the humiliation of the past, solidified her skill and leadership, and rewritten the expectations of those who had once doubted her. She was no longer defined by the ashes of a burned uniform. She was defined by the unbreakable spirit that rose from it. The morning fog lay thick over the training grounds, the Pacific waves churning violently in the distance. Elena Rivera adjusted her gear one last time before the culmination exercise, the final test of leadership, endurance, and tactical skill. Months of preparation, years of doubt, and memories of humiliation all converged in this moment. Today was not about proving her worth to herself. It was about showing the world and those who had once doubted her that fire could forge, not destroy. Her team assembled quickly, eyes sharp, weapons ready, movements honed by months of grueling training. Around them, whispers floated from nearby units. Men who had once mocked her presence now watched, their faces a mix of disbelief and respect. Among them were the very same Marines who had laughed at the burned uniform, their previous arrogance replaced with tentative acknowledgement. The scenario was brutal. A mock city controlled by hostile forces, multiple hostage situations, simulated ambushes, and complex extraction routes. Every SEAL and Marine team moved with caution, but Ilana's unit led the charge. Her commands were precise, calm, and authoritative. "Stack on me." Clear left, eyes up. The words resonated across the chaos. Flashbangs detonated, smoke filled the alleyways, and simulated gunfire cracked in rapid succession. Many would have faltered under such conditions. Elena thrived. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. She led by example, never hesitating, never panicking, guiding her team through the chaos as if the battlefield itself obeyed her will. Halfway through the operation, a simulated explosion blocked their path, separating some of her team from the main group. Panic rippled through other units. But Elena's response was instantaneous. Form a perimeter. Check each corner. Maintain communication. Her team executed flawlessly. They navigated debris-strewn streets, secured hostages, and neutralized threats with surgical precision. Instructors watching from above, amazed at her calm composure under pressure. Her former tormentors were there too, cornered in a quiet observation post, forced to witness the woman they once ridiculed operate with unmatched skill and authority. One muttered under his breath, voice barely audible, We never imagined." Elena didn't need to hear it. She had transcended the ridicule, the doubt, and the flames that had marked her early days. Her victory was silent, measured, undeniable. The final phase of the exercise involved extraction under fire. Vehicles were simulated as hostile targets, and the team needed to transport hostages to a safe location while evading enemy forces. Elena coordinated movements with precision, anticipating threats, calculating angles, and keeping morale high. A younger trainee hesitated under the stress of simulated gunfire. Elena moved instantly, positioning herself beside him, whispering concise instructions. Stay low. Follow my count. Watch the left flank. The trainee nodded, obeying without hesitation. Together, they cleared the route, neutralized threats, and reached the extraction point ahead of schedule. The entire exercise had been completed flawlessly, a feat none of the other teams could match. Her former tormentors looked on, their expressions unreadable. Words of mockery, laughter, and disbelief had been replaced by silent acknowledgement. She had proven herself, not through confrontation or revenge, but through action and mastery. After the exercise, instructors assembled all participants for final remarks. The room was thick with tension as the lead instructor addressed the group. Every team performed well. He began, scanning the candidates. But one individual and her unit demonstrated exceptional skill, leadership, and calm under pressure. Her presence elevated the entire exercise. She led flawlessly, inspired confidence, and executed every task with precision. That individual is Elena Rivera. A brief silence followed, then subdued applause from the teams. Her former tormentors shifted uneasily. The very men who had laughed at her uniform, who had doubted her every step, were now witnesses to her unshakable dominance. Elena said nothing, simply standing tall, trident gleaming, body poised. She didn't need to speak. Her actions had spoken volumes. Later that evening, the teams gathered informally on the beach. The men who had once mocked her uniform approached cautiously. One spoke first, voice low and sincere. We underestimated you, Rivera. We didn't believe any of us thought you'd lead like that, excel like that. We were wrong. Elena's response was calm, measured, but carried weight. Expectations are irrelevant. Execution defines results. What matters is what you do, not what others think. No anger. No gloating. Only the quiet authority of someone who had endured fire and emerged stronger. Another former tormentor stepped forward, hesitation clear in his stance. We laughed at you, earned your uniform. We thought you'd break, but you didn't. You didn't just survive. You led. You excelled. Elena nodded, a faint, private smile forming. She had come full circle, not seeking revenge, but vindication through mastery, resilience, and leadership. As the moon rose over the Pacific, casting silver light across the waves, Elena reflected on her journey. The fire that had once burned her uniform, the humiliation she had endured, the whispers of doubt, all of it had been transformed. Pain had become power, ridicule into determination, and doubt into unwavering confidence. She looked at the men around her, some of whom had doubted her every step. None of them would ever forget this day, nor the quiet, undeniable force she had become. Instructors approached her privately, acknowledging her exceptional performance. "Rivera," one said, "you've done more than earn respect. You've set the standard. Others will follow you, and they should." "What you've accomplished is extraordinary," Elena nodded. Recognition was never her goal, but the acknowledgement felt quiet, deserved, and profound. The next day, Elena returned to her quarters, removing her gear and carefully placing her trident on the shelf. She touched it gently, memories flooding back. The fire, the ashes, the months of grueling training. The trident was more than a pin. It was a symbol of transformation, a reminder that no obstacle, no humiliation, and no fire could destroy resolve. Her journey had begun in flames and mockery, but it had ended in mastery, respect, and quiet triumph. She had risen from the ashes stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. Elena Rivera had not only survived, she had dominated. She had returned to face those who doubted her, not with confrontation, but with undeniable excellence. In doing so, she had rewritten the narrative of her life, proving that true strength comes not from size or circumstance, but from fire forged within. The Pacific waves crashed against the shore, relentless and eternal, just like her spirit. And as she gazed into the horizon, Elena knew the future held challenges she was ready to face. She had been forged in fire, tempered in salt and sweat, and now nothing could break her. From the ashes of humiliation had risen a leader, ACAL, and a force no one could ever ignore.